remember then what the first thing was that I wrote, but it actually, the first code for Facebook started way before then, right? So I, like probably a lot of you guys, just built a lot of stuff for myself. All throughout my childhood, I built games that I wanted to play. I built a music player that I wanted. I tried to build stuff that I really wanted for myself, right? And I was young. I wasn't building very high quality stuff. It was just stuff that I wanted, not for anyone else. And then when I got to college, I started wanting to build products that would let me get insight into the community around me and let me connect with the people around me. And that had the property that you can't actually just build something that only you use. If you want to be able to connect with people around you, you have to start building software that other people are going to use as well. Actually, a lot earlier than that, in my sophomore year, one of the first things that I built that was kind of like this was actually called Course Match. I don't think we've talked about this that much in any of these startup schools. It was, I was trying to figure out what classes I wanted to take my sophomore fall, and I wanted to see what other people who had taken the CS classes that I'd taken wanted to take, and what my friends were planning on taking and what they'd taken in the past. But there was no database like that was out there, so I thought, all right, well, how can I do this? So I went and I wrote this little script that scraped the course catalog and let people put in what classes they wanted, and I called it the course graph. And that was actually the first time. Yeah, I mean, it was actually, I made the mistake of running the website from a laptop in my dorm room, and my desk was right next to the bathroom, when there was like constantly steam pouring out of that from people showering, so the laptop actually fried, and I lost that one after like a few weeks of it running. But that was the first time that I had ever really set up a production, Apache server or MySQL server, or a lot of that stuff, and then, a lot of those things, then when I went on to build later stuff, I had those lessons and I knew that I could set those things up quickly, so those were just building blocks on top of which to build future things.
Did people put their classes in it? Did you use it to decide what to take?
No, it was like 1,000 or 2,000 people out of the,
Really?
It was like 6,000 people at Harvard
Yeah.
used it. Yeah, so I mean, it worked fine. It was actually really interesting. People spent so much time just clicking through the links of people to see what classes they were in, and then in the classes they clicked on people who were the roster of the people. And it was just, I thought it was going to be interesting, and I wanted to solve this problem, but it was actually just way more compelling. And part of my theory at the time was, I looked at all the other types of content that were out there on the internet, right? It's like you could search for any music or news or content or reference material that you wanted, but part of my theory at the time was that people were really missing from the internet, right? And there were no services like that. And that's why I built some of these services that went in that direction, but I still think people are largely missing from a lot of the software that we build, which is why I'm focused on building this development platform today as part of Facebook, so that way the next generation of software that the industry builds can just be more human.
I think the key is building a company which is focused on learning as quickly as possible. Right? Companies are learning organisms, and you can make decisions that either make it so that you learn faster or you learn slower. And in a lot of ways, building a company is like following the scientific method, right? You try a bunch of different hypotheses, and if you set up the experiments well, then you kind of learn what to do. And I think that's an important philosophy. So there are all these different decisions that we make inside the company, everything down to really empowering individual engineers. We invest in this huge testing framework, right? At any given point in time, there's not just one version of Facebook running in the world, right? There's probably tens of thousands of versions running, because engineers here have the power to try out an idea and ship it to maybe 10,000 people or 100,000 people, and then they get a readout on how that version of what they did, whether it was a change to show better content in newsfeed or UI change or some new feature, they get a readout on how that version performed compared to the baseline version of Facebook that we have on everything that we care about, how connected people are, how much people are sharing and how much they say that they're finding meaningful content, business metrics like how much revenue we make and engagement of the overall community. And by running tens of thousands of different experiments and putting the power in people's hands to try all these different things, you can imagine we just make so much more progress than we could if every change had to be approved by me, right? Or every idea had to come from management. So I do think that there's something very deep about building this, learning culture and moving quickly towards that just helps you get ahead over time. I built the first version of Facebook because it's something that my friends and I wanted to use at Harvard, a directory and a way to connect with the other people around us. And I didn't think at all that it was going to be a company. I remember very specifically the night that we launched the first version. I went out to get pizza with a couple of my friends who now work here, and I remember really clearly we were talking about how one day we thought that someone was going to build a community like this for the world, and that would be some company, but it clearly wasn't going to be us. I mean, it wasn't even.
It didn't even occur.
Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't even an option that we considered that it might be us. I mean, we just weren't focused on building a company back then. We were just building something that we thought would be useful at our school.
Well, I mean, I think it's a lot of the cultural values that we've talked about so far. So, I think making it so that this is a place where people can move quickly is just key. Having an emphasis on making bold decisions and being bold in the products that we build, I think is why we have products like Newsfeed, right, which at the time was controversial, but now is one of the core parts of the product and has been emulated by a lot of other startups and companies. Or why we have Platform. When we built our first version of the development platform, I mean, people weren't thinking about social networks as social platforms for social software development. And that was a pretty controversial decision, and we decided to go for it. Now we have a development community of almost 1 million developers, so that is kind of a direct byproduct of that kind of line of thinking. And then I think just also focusing on leverage and impact. The best people want to go to the place where they can have the biggest impact. And we have always focused on this ratio here of the number of engineers that we have to the size of the user base, like for the impact that they're going to have. And what we found is that each engineer here is roughly responsible for more than 1 million users. Right? If you do that calculation, that's much more than smaller companies that have smaller user bases but in smaller employee bases, and much larger than larger companies that have maybe more users but also a lot more employees. So we're kind of in this sweet spot, and we've always focused on building the company in a way where there's just a lot of leverage, and that would encourage just the best people to come join the company. When I started off, I was programming the site, and I wrote the first version, and I mean, we don't really have a second version. We're just constantly iterating on it. So I guess for most of last school year, I just worked on scaling and kind of trying to make it keep up with the increasing load and try to make it so that we can expand to more schools and work out the network infrastructure and all that stuff. But I mean, as that time was going along, we would also kind of opportunistically hire people who we thought were really smart. And I mean, for most of last year, we were just a few guys working around my kitchen table, and I mean, that was pretty fun. But I guess around in February, we got an office, and then we kind of took all these people who we'd been hiring, and we brought them into one space, which was interesting, because then for the first time, I kind of looked up and was like, wow, I have a team of engineers here and like a lot of smart people who can start building a lot of stuff in a different way than it's currently being done. And right now it was me and my roommate Dustin just kind of sitting there working serially on one project and then finishing it and then planning that and then doing the next project, and with like little help from the other people who are around, but trying to figure out how to manage the transition from doing that, especially when you're kind of one of the people who's programming, to saying, okay, we have 8 really talented people here. What's now the most efficient use of people's time? Like, how can people maybe be working on stuff, not serially, but I mean, let's say someone's working on launching the high school product over here, and someone else is working on photos, and someone else is working on the thing that we're going to launch next week. What's the most efficient use of people? And I mean, so that's kind of an interesting problem, and I mean, something that
I don't really have any good insight on for you guys. I mean, I'll maybe check back in a year or so. But I think that one thing that Jim was getting at was sort of the dynamics between people. And I mean, the dynamic of managing people and being CEO in a company is a lot different than being college roommates with someone. And when you go into something and your expectations are that, this is going to be a site that maybe a few thousand people are on, and then the guy drops out of school to come out to California to work with you, and it just kind of changes things up. And I don't know, I think that it definitely, you kind of have to think at a higher level about how the landscape is playing out, and in terms of you need to not only have engineers who can directly work on the products that you're working on, but then you need to start having a finance department or something that I never thought that I would ever need, in terms of running a website in order to power the infrastructure of just having a 20 or 30 person engineering team. And then it's okay, so you have all these people, then how do you kind of watch what they're doing and not try to control too much what they're doing, because they're all really smart people, which is why we brought them, and we want to leverage the fact that they have a lot of really good ideas and can do a lot of the stuff themselves. But how do you make sure that it's conforming to standards, or that it's being done well enough, both from product perspective and engineering perspective? So.
Having this child has made us think about all of the things that should be improved in the world for her whole generation. The only way that we reach our full human potential is if we're able to unlock the gifts of every person around the world.
We need to make sure that there are investments in programs that ensure that the future isn't going to be like today. The future is going to be better than today.
What does it take to make it so that people don't get sick anymore? Can we build more inclusive and welcoming communities? Can people in the next generation learn and experience 100 times more things than we can? I think the answer to that is yes. And I just think that means that we have a basic moral responsibility to tilt our investments somewhat more as a society and as individuals.
Starting our work now in investing in the future is an easy decision for us.
It's hard to move these things in the short term, right? These are big, complex systems. Like doing anything that you want to well in the world, that just takes practice. And you're not going to be perfect at it the first time. And in the projects that we're going to try to do in education and science and health and community building, we will learn lessons over time and hopefully get better and better.
We're expecting our little girl any day now, and we want her to have the benefits of an entire generation that is able to take advantage of all that we're able to create.
She and everyone in her generation really should be able to live much better lives than we can in all these ways. And I hope that, not just our child, but, everyone in our community has an opportunity to go on and have an even bigger impact in the world. I think she'll get there.
After one particularly tense argument, one of my close advisors told me if I didn't agree to sell the company right now, I would regret that decision for the rest of my life. Relationships were so frayed that within a year or so, every single person on our management team was gone. I believed in what we were doing, but I felt alone. And worse, it was my fault. I wondered if I was just wrong, an imposter, a 22-year-old kid who had no idea how things actually worked. Now, years later, I understand that is how things work when there's no sense of higher purpose. So it's up to all of us to create it so we can all keep moving forward together. And today, I want to talk about 3 ways that we can create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose. By taking on big, meaningful projects together. By redefining equality so everyone has the freedom to pursue their purpose. And by building community all across the world. So first, let's take on big, meaningful projects. Our generation is going to have to deal with tens of millions of jobs replaced by automation like self-driving cars and trucks.
But we have the potential to do so much more than that. Every generation has its defining works. More than 300,000 people worked to put that man on the moon, including that janitor. Millions of volunteers immunized children around the world against polio, and millions of more people built the Hoover Dam and other great projects. And now it's our generation's turn to do great things. Now I know, maybe you're thinking, I don't know how to build a dam. I don't know how to get 1 million people involved in anything. Well, let me tell you a secret. No one does when they begin. Ideas don't come out fully formed. They only become clear as you work on them. You just have to get started. If I had to know everything about connecting people before I got started, I never would have built Facebook. Movies and pop culture just get this all wrong. The idea of a single eureka moment is a dangerous lie. It makes us feel inadequate because we feel like we haven't had ours yet. And it prevents people with seeds of good ideas from ever getting started in the first place. Oh, and you know what else movies get wrong about innovation? No one writes math formulas on glass, okay? All right? That's not a thing, okay?
One of the hardest parts for me was actually when Yahoo offered to buy the company for a lot of money. You know, at the end of that, Dustin and I just decided, no, we think that we can actually go connect more than just the 10 million people who are in schools. We can go beyond that and have this really be a successful thing. And we decided to go for it, but that was really stressful because a lot of people really thought that we should sell the company. The part that was painful wasn't turning down the offer. It was the fact that after that, huge amounts of the company quit because they didn't believe in what we were doing. Right? I mean, if you look at the management team that we had,
did that whole management team leave?
The whole management team was gone within about a year after that.
What about the bigger bets, like making a large acquisition or the rollout of a newsfeed or something like that? How do those decisions work?
So I actually think when you do stuff well, you shouldn't have to do big crazy things. We bought the Oculus team for a lot of money. Right? I actually view that as if we'd done a better job of building up some of the expertise to do some of that stuff internally, then maybe we wouldn't have had to do that. But instead we hadn't done that, and the Oculus team is by far the most talented team working on that problem. So it just made sense to go make this big move. But I actually kind of think as CEO, it's your job to not get into a position where you need to be doing these crazy things, right? And,
yes.
Of course it's inevitable. Over the period of doing stuff, you'll you can't be ahead of everything. So it's better to make big moves and be willing to do that than have pride and not do that and never admit that you could have done something better in the past. But I think when stuff is working well, you're learning incrementally and growing that way.
I want to know the very first thing you do. You get out of the bed. You go to the bathroom.
Oh, I don't. No, the first thing I do is look at my phone.
Oh, you look at the phone first.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yes. Yeah,
I do that too.
I look at Facebook.
Right.
To see what's going on in the world.
Right. Right.
And I check my messages. I look at Messenger and WhatsApp.
And how many minutes would you say you spend?
It depends on what's going on in the world. On a good, calm day,
right.
It'll probably be no more than a few minutes.
Right.
It's actually a pretty sad situation, to be honest, because I have contacts, right? I mean,
right.
I can't see that well.
Right, me too.
And before I put my contacts in, I often go look to see what's going on Facebook too. Mm-hmm. But I'm very nearsighted, so I'm like, I was never a morning person. Max is definitely turning me into a morning person. Max is like a pterodactyl. It's like I didn't know a human could make those noises.
Right. And then, do you take a shower, or you work out first?
The better strategy is to work out and then you shower. I think.
Not Barack Obama. He likes to shower
and then work out,
shave and work out, which I found to be very odd.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.